Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, welcome back to the podcast and thank you very much for tuning into yet another episode. In this solo episode, I want to give you some tips on how to choose an online coach. I decided to record it in January because it's a time when many people think about their goals for the year. So you might have decided that you're ready to tackle fitness in a more serious way than ever before, and so you want to get a coach. However, when you Google online coach, or if you look at online coaches on Instagram, you quickly come to realize that there are a ton of them. So how do you choose the right one for you? And that's exactly what this podcast is going to help you with. Obviously, I am an online coach myself, but I also had an online coach and I plan to hire more in the future. So I think I'm relatively qualified to give you some objective considerations to make as a potential client in order to find the coach that best suits you, your personality, your preferences, and your needs. So, without further ado, let's get straight into the first consideration. What qualifications and insurance does the online coach you're looking at have, if any? This is important because, unfortunately, the fitness industry is quite dysregulated to the point where people can call themselves a personal trainer without a formal qualification, which sounds crazy, but I've heard horror stories like this. And potential clients, unless they are in the fitness industry themselves, don't usually know much about these qualifications and they might not think about asking. So if the online coach you're looking at doesn't mention their qualifications on their Instagram profile or other social media platform, or if they don't mention them on their website, I would send them a message and ask for these. And when you do ask, or when you look for these qualifications, make sure that, depending on your goals, on what you want to coach for, they have a qualification in personal training. And also, if you want to hire someone to help you with your nutrition, that they have qualifications in nutrition. Because something that you might assume is that if you become a personal trainer, you get qualified to help people with their nutrition. Some qualifications, like my own, involved some modules about nutrition, and the modules that I took were certified by the Association for Nutrition in England, which means that to a certain extent, with some specific limits, I can help people with their nutrition. But not all qualifications in personal training only offer this extra nutrition option. And again, even when personal trainers are qualified to give nutritional advice, there are some specific limitations. For example, to my knowledge, unless you are a registered nutritionist or dietitian, in the UK, you're not allowed to prescribe meal plans or supplements. And that's why whenever a client joins my online coaching team, I never ever give them a meal plan, and I also never ever prescribe a supplement. If they ask me for information, if they ask me, hey Nick, do you have any supplements that you would recommend? I can provide them with a list, and I also always make sure to include some links to reputable sources where they can read more about the supplements themselves, and then they can make an informed decision. My remit as an online coach with the qualifications I have right now is limited to providing information for the client to make an informed choice. It is not to prescribe. So it's very important, in my opinion, that you understand whether the online coach you're considering is qualified and what they're qualified in specifically. And separately, they also would need some type of insurance to work with clients. For example, I purchase a yearly insurance plan that enables me to work not only with clients in person, but also with clients online. To be clear, I am based in the UK, so I'm not sure if elsewhere in the world maybe online coaches don't need insurance, but it might be worth asking if the coach has any, and then research whether online coaches are allowed in your country to work with or without insurance. Now, the second consideration is, what does the coach you're looking at specialize in? So, first and foremost, is their specialization compatible with your goals? For example, if you want to become an endurance runner, don't come to me because I specialize in helping people build their physique. So I'm very focused on resistance training, be it calisthenics or lifting weights or a combination of the two. I am not specialized in endurance running, so I would never take on a client and write them a running program. There's also a little bit more nuance to consider when it comes to specialization, because a certain coach could have a specific specialization that fits with your needs, but the way they provide the service might not fit with your needs. For example, I do my best to be very clear in regards to what I offer and how my coaching method works. And in my case, yes, I specialize in helping people build their physique, but I also make sure to clarify that I also help them change their lifestyle and I help them change their mindset. I really want it to come across that what I'm helping people with is a long-term lifestyle transformation. So if that's not what you're after, there's no point in you signing up with me. Other coaches specialize in short-term physique transformations. For example, they offer 12-week challenges. And so if that's what you're after, if that's what you think is best for you at this time, that would be a better coach for you. Now, circling back to the original consideration, the first consideration about qualifications, you also want to make sure that if the coach has a certain specialization, they're also qualified to help clients in that particular niche. For example, in my case, if I specialize in helping people build their physique, I don't necessarily need any extra qualification, although I did take a course that was about coaching physique athletes specifically. So technically, I have a qualification in helping people prep for a bodybuilding competition, which is the extreme of building a physique, right? Therefore, I can, with that qualification, certainly also help somebody who simply wants to put on a bit more muscle and lose a little bit of fat. But I would say that in the case of the type of person that I help, I don't necessarily need a super specific qualification. A better example of what I'm trying to convey here is, if you have a very specific health condition that requires a very specific diet, then you would need to make sure that the coach you're looking at has qualifications that are required to treat that particular condition. For example, if you have a gut health related condition, you need to work with a gut health specialist that deals with your condition. Don't come to me for gut health related help because I can't help you with that. And I am always going to be very upfront about this with all potential clients and refer them to another professional if I need to. As an example, I had a client a few years ago who we discovered together when they started working with me that they were dealing with binge eating to an extent where it's bordered on binge eating disorder. So at the time, I was coaching them for nutrition and training, but I told them, look, now that this has come up, I can't keep you on for nutrition. I can help you with training, but you need to team up with a specialist in order to treat your binge eating. And on this point, I would encourage you to beware of those coaches who say that they had the same experience and that's what qualifies them to work with that person. For instance, I suffered from an eating disorder and from disordered eating, but I would never advertise myself as an eating disorder specialist because you need qualifications that are certified by an external body in order to ethically and lawfully claim that you can work with certain people and conditions because those qualifications prove that you actually went through the training needed to help those people. Yes, I recovered from my eating disorder, but my experience of recovery won't be your experience of recovery. So I can't ethically and lawfully advertise myself as somebody who can help you with recovery. Now, for the third consideration, what are the coach's personality and values like? And this can be very difficult to glean if you simply look at their social media posts. It can give you a starting point, I would say. For example, look at what they're posting and the kind of captions that they write. Do they share educational content with detailed captions? And maybe sometimes they reference specific scientific articles. Or do they write really short, snappy captions with primarily selfies? That's going to tell you something about what their personality and their values are like. However, I think that you're not giving that coach a fair chance, and you're also not doing yourself a fair service if you limit your research to their social media platforms. I would commit to finding longer form content that can help you get a better impression of how they come across because social media simply isn't nuanced enough. And what I mean by longer form content would be things like a podcast. That's a long form type of content because it lasts longer than Twitter's 140 character limit or Instagram's 2000 character limit. I think it's 2000, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. Another example would be a blog post. Basically, try to find some platform where the coach discusses a topic in great detail, and that can give you much better insight into what message they're trying to convey, how they're trying to convey it, and what their methods are as well. And once you get a better understanding of all of that, you can also get a better insight into their values. For example, if they are an online coach and they help people with their physique goals, but they also write blog posts about sleep and stress management, then you can get an idea about the fact that they value holistic health. So they value an approach to health that takes into consideration more than only training and nutrition. And that's what I do. I have articles and podcasts, and I plan to record more podcasts about aspects of your lifestyle that go beyond your calories, your macros, and your training program, because I strongly believe that those factors, those components of health are all helpful if you want to achieve a long-term lifestyle transformation. And to be very clear, I'm not saying that my approach is better than everybody else's approach and that you should choose me because I have this holistic approach. What I'm trying to say is that every coach is going to have their coaching method, they're going to have values, and they're going to solve a specific problem. So you want to do your best to make sure that as much as possible, that method, those values, and the problem that the coach is helping people solve are all aligned with your own values, your needs, and your current goals. Because if they are not, that coach isn't going to be a good fit for you. As I was saying before, since I help people with lifestyle transformations, if you want a shorter term, quicker transformation, I'm not the person for you. And if you're not at all interested in resistance training, then I'm also not the coach for you because that's what I specialize in programming. So again, I'm not here to toot my own horn and say, hey, you should hire me today. I'm trying to give you some perspective and some food for thought on what to think about when you're about to hire a coach and when you're looking for one. Moving on to consideration number 4, what is the coach's current and previous client's experience like? And again, I invite you not to stop at a coach's transformation pictures that you might find on their website or on their social media platform. Again, these are very helpful. I use transformation pictures myself. I share them on my website. I share them on my social media platforms, in my newsletter. So I'm not saying they are necessarily bad. They're simply an incomplete picture of what the client experience is like. For example, in my case, since I understand these limitations and they irk me, I also try to include something like a written message or an audio message that a client sent me, with their permission, of course, where they described in a nutshell how our coaching experience has made them feel so far. Because I think that simply looking at a before and after picture doesn't really capture how big of an impact a coach might have had on the way you think and how you feel about your body and what your body can do in addition to what your body looks like. So I don't think that transformation pictures can tell the whole story, but even in the case of, let's say that this coach has testimonials like I do and they include them in the transformation picture post, that's still not very much information to go on at the end of the day, because as I was saying, all social media platforms have word count limits or limits to how long a video can be. So my recommendation would be find out who their clients are and connect with them. Send them a message on social media and ask them if they would be willing to answer a few questions about their experience. For example, if you came to me and said, look, I like what you're doing, but is there any way that I can speak to a client of yours? I would absolutely check with my clients and see if any of them would be willing to connect with this person. And then I would very happily tell this potential client, yeah, speak to so and they'll be able to answer your questions. And if a coach is willing to put you in touch with some clients and they're not defensive about it, then in my opinion, that shows that they are very transparent, and that's quite a green flag for you. Now, if you don't necessarily want to do this, another way to get a better insight into the client experience is to find out if the coach has testimonials or reviews somewhere on their social media platforms or on Google or on their website. I actually have long form reviews on all of these platforms. As I said, I usually include a testimonial in my social media transformation posts, in my client spotlight posts. I also have a highlight on Instagram where I collect stories that my clients tagged me in, where they mention something about how my service makes them feel or what their experience looks like so far. So you can look at those highlights as well. I have Google reviews. I usually ask my clients to write a Google review for me if they're willing and able to do so. And I post those Google reviews on my website as well, at least a shortened version of them. And then I have a link to my Google profile. So from my website, you can go to Google and read the review in its entirety. And these are all great ways to find out what kind of clients this coach helps and what their experience has been like so far. Consideration number 5 is, in practical terms, what does the coach offer? First and foremost, which services do they provide and which one do you think is the best fit for you? And if this isn't clear from their website, or if you really like them but you don't seem to find an option that might suit you, I would ask them. For example, I've had clients who maybe came across me on social media, maybe they couldn't find my website, or maybe my website wasn't clear enough, and they asked me, do you offer nutrition only and train only, or do you do nutrition plus training together all the time? And my answer is yes, I absolutely offer one or the other only and not both together, depending on the client's situation. And if they hadn't asked that question, they might not have hired me, even if they really, really liked me. So if you're in doubt, ask. But in many cases, a good coach will make it as clear as possible on their social media platform or on their website or in their newsletter what kind of services they offer and how you can apply for each option. Before you commit financially, do they offer a way for you to get to know them in a one-on-one setting as opposed to a public social media platform? For example, I offer a consultation to all potential clients, and that's about 30 minutes in length, and it's a video consultation, although there's the option to do audio only if somebody felt a bit challenged by or intimidated by a video call with a stranger. And I think that a consultation is a great way for me to get to know the potential client and vice versa, because coaching is about building a relationship with the professional that you want help from. If that relationship isn't as good as it can be, you're not going to get the best results. I could be the best coach in the world, but if my personality, my values, my coaching method, and the way I communicate information isn't right for you, if these components aren't right for you, then you're not going to get the service that you deserve. So that's why I think that a consultation is so helpful. That's why I offer it. And that's why I would encourage you to find out if your coach offers that. And for the consultation, I recommend that you write down a list of questions and that you ask them at that stage, at the consultation stage. You can use this podcast episode to inspire your questions. And in addition to what I've already said, I have some, again, very practical questions that you might want to ask. From a bureaucratic standpoint, does the coach have a contract, or do you, quote unquote, shake hands? In my opinion, having a very detailed contract, and when I say very detailed, I don't mean it needs to be a novel, but I think having a written contract with all the terms stated very clearly, so what you can expect from the coach and what the coach can expect from you, is a cornerstone of a transparent relationship. And transparency and honesty are great values of mine because I believe they can really help the coach-client relationship thrive, and therefore they can help the client get the best results that they deserve. So I would make sure to ask whether the coach offers this or not. And then it's up to you and what you personally prefer and feel most comfortable with to go ahead. Again, I'm not trying to say that my approach is better than other people's. Maybe there are fantastic coaches who complete all of the bureaucracy aspect of coaching via email. They don't really have a specific contract or anything like that. And they might have perfectly understandable reasons for doing so. But if that's the case, at the very least, I, as a potential client, would ask them why it is that they only do it via email. And then I would make an informed decision on whether to hire them or not based on their answer. And then past the client onboarding process, once you've made the payment, you've signed up, you signed the contract if they have one, does the coach offer any guides to help you get set up as a client? Do they wing it? How do they provide the training program and the nutrition coaching if they offer nutrition coaching? Essentially, you don't necessarily need to know every little detail about their service because it takes a long time to explain. And honestly, until you try it, you're not going to be able to fully understand it. But I think it's helpful to know if what you're getting is a PDF or a Word document, if it's an app, if it's a website. And again, based on that and based on your personal preferences, you can then ask further questions. For example, you can say, look, I'm not really keen on having yet another app on my phone. Do you offer an alternative to where maybe I can access the program via my laptop instead, if that's your preference? So I think to an extent it's useful to have this information before you commit to working with the coach. However, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker. For example, in my case at least, I try to make my coaching service as flexible as I can. I certainly have a structure, I have a method, but at the same time, online coaching is a very generic term, and every coach has their own way of doing things, and they could be more or less flexible. So I think if a coach tells you this is how I do things, I wouldn't necessarily think that that's a deal breaker, because if you ask them, if you said, look, I would really love to work with you, but I have this problem with this part of your method. Is there an alternative? They might well have an alternative. So I would certainly ask them before saying, oh, well, they use spreadsheets and I can't deal with spreadsheets, so let's just go with somebody else. Especially if they give you a really good impression otherwise. So this is to say, when it comes to finding out more about their methods, this isn't because the method is necessarily a red flag. It's more so that you make sure that there is an alternative if a specific option that's included really doesn't work for you for some reason. Now, these are all the main considerations I had in mind, but I also had some additional thoughts of a slightly different nature. And what I mean by that is that so far, I think I've worded my considerations to ensure that you can pinpoint red flags. Because, as I said at the very beginning, well, I started by saying that the fitness industry is very dysregulated. So, what I've said so far might have come across in some ways as a warning against certain practices in the fitness industry. So, the way my final thoughts differ from that is that I want to offer you some perspective on what you might think a coach ought to be like in order to help you versus what they could actually be like and still be able to help you. To start with, I don't think a coach needs to have the same experience as you've had so far. I think it can help because it can make them more empathetic to your experience, but potentially I would give them a chance to coach you even if they don't. For example, when I was younger, I had overweight, but I never developed obesity. So it wouldn't be truthful and transparent of me to say that I fully understand the perspective of somebody who has lived with obesity for a certain number of years. However, I can help clients with obesity. I do help them at the moment, and I have helped them in the past with really great results. And ultimately, it's up to you whether the coach's personal background is important to you or not, and the degree to which it's important to you. I would simply say if they're giving you a really good impression, I think they deserve a chance, even if they don't necessarily have the exact same experience that you've had. Another common misconception, I would call it, that I've come across is that some people believe that new coaches are quote unquote bad coaches, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily true. In the end, we all start with zero clients, and nobody gets a chance to become a truly outstanding coach if there wasn't one client in the beginning who gave them that chance to get experience. And I believe that there are many well-intentioned and skilled coaches who are very new to the fitness industry, so they might not have experience on their side, but they have a lot of knowledge. They took the time to educate themselves. They have many years of experience being an athlete themselves. And I don't mean a professional athlete, I simply mean they've been going to the gym consistently, they've been managing their nutrition consistently. So if you come across someone like that and you think that their values and the message they share, their coaching methods, their personality, all of these aspects seem in line with what you'd want from a coach, I would give them a chance. Yes, you would go into coaching knowing that they don't have a lot of experience on their side working with other clients. However, I think you can still have a really valuable experience nonetheless. When I started, I had zero clients at that point, but I still did my best. I really cared about my clients. I took the time to educate myself as much as I possibly could. Nowadays, there are weekend long personal training courses. So in 2 days, you can get qualified. I knew this at the time when I was looking into personal training courses, and I honestly didn't feel good about coaching someone after a 2 day course. So I actually went to the extent of researching courses that were as long as they could possibly be. And I ended up purchasing the specific course I ended up doing based on the fact that it was longer than others that I had seen, and obviously it also had other benefits that I really liked. For example, they offered a combination of online learning and in-person workshops, as opposed to just being an online course that lasted 5 days, or just a weekend course that was in person the whole time. So if somebody is well intentioned and they've taken the time to do their best to gain the knowledge necessary to help clients, I don't think that their level of experience ought to put you off working with them. As long as they're open and honest about their level of experience and you really like them and you can't identify any major red flag, I would suggest considering hiring them regardless. For instance, last year, I had a client who hired me for a photo shoot prep, and during our consultation, I was extremely honest. I told them I've only ever prepped myself for a photo shoot. So if you're happy with that, I can prep you. Based on the conversation we've had, I think you are in a good headspace for such a harsh diet. And I think that your body is also healthy enough to sustain it. So if you're satisfied with the expectations I've laid out in terms of my own experience, then it's your choice. And ultimately, they decided to hire me. And so now I have more experience of prepping not only myself, but other people for photo shoots. And that's an extra tool in my toolbox that enables me to help more people than before. And it's only thanks to that one client who put their faith on me that I was able to gain that experience. And they also got the experience that they wanted. They were very happy with coaching, and we parted on really good terms after the photo shoot prep was over, and they had recovered from the diet. Therefore, as long as there's transparency on both sides and good communication, I think it can be a win-win situation. My next thought is, in a way, I'm playing devil's advocate here when I'm saying that in the end, hiring a coach, an online coach in particular, is a risk. Just like any experience in life that's worth doing, to a certain extent, you can do all the research in the world, but until you actually work with the coach, you don't know what to expect. So you're going to have to take a leap of faith. And when I'm saying I'm playing devil's advocate, so far I've given you so much advice on what kind of research to do. And now I'm saying, well, you can spend hours and hours listening to a coach's podcast, reading their blog posts, but ultimately, yes, you want to do your research. I think that's very important. But you also don't want to wait forever just to find the perfect quote unquote coach. I know it's not great because you're committing time, effort, you're committing financially to working with someone. And if you have a bad experience, that's disappointing. But in a way, even bad experiences are helpful because they teach you what not to look for in a coach. I had a number of clients who came to me after working with other coaches and they told me, look, I worked with this person and I know for a fact that this thing they did put me off. That's extremely helpful for you to have a better experience with your next coach because, well, I try to do my best to take on board everything a potential client tells me. So if they're telling me this coach made me do X, and I hated that, and that's why I stopped working with them. Well, guess what? I'm not gonna give X to that client, right? So it helps your coach you better, and it helps you identify coaching red flags that are specific to you and that nobody else could teach you in a podcast like I'm trying to do now, or in a blog post, or elsewhere on the internet. Last but not least, when you start working with a coach, be patient. As I said, effective coaching depends on the relationship that you build with said coach, and building a relationship takes time. You can't go into coaching expecting that it will be fantastic from day one because you don't know how the coach works other than what they might have told you at the consultation stage, or other than the information you might have gathered from other sources. That coach doesn't know you. It doesn't know they don't know how your body responds to certain nutrition protocols, to training in a certain way. So you can't jump into coaching thinking it's gonna be the best experience ever, because you will be sorely disappointed. At the beginning, it's going to be a little awkward, just like you wouldn't expect to go on your first date and fall in love with that person to a point where you would ask them to marry you at the end of the date. That doesn't make any sense. You've met them for what, 4 hours, and you're committing to living with them for your entire life. Clearly that's silly, right? And it's the same with coaching. And similarly, you wouldn't expect to become best friends with someone after having an hour long conversation with them. So when you hire someone, give them at least 3 to 6 months of your time and commitment, unless something feels really, really off. In that case, clearly you would want to stop coaching sooner. But if you think that it's a little awkward and that it wasn't exactly what you were expecting, but overall the coach seems well intentioned, you need to accept that to a certain extent, fitness takes time, coaching takes time, and so you might not get the type of coaching that you want right off the bat, but you have the potential to get it in the future. Here's another analogy that's actually fitness related. When you start a diet, you're not gonna get the exact fat loss results you would want after a week, because maybe you're not tracking your calories too well. Maybe you're not choosing the right foods, so you end up going over your calories because you're very hungry at the end of the day. But then after a couple of weeks, you understand how to track somewhat accurately, somewhat consistently. You understand which foods help you feel satiated so you don't go overboard. And that's when you start seeing quicker results, more efficient results than you were seeing in the beginning. And that's exactly what coaching is like at the end of the day. So be patient and give a chance to that relationship to develop and grow before you decide that that particular coach isn't for you. And that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you very much for lending me your ear for this long. I really hope that this is going to help you find the right coach for you, or if the first time you're not that lucky, that it gives you at least some food for thought on how to make the most even of a negative experience with an online coach. As always, if you want to connect with me, all the links to my free content, like my blog, my newsletter, my social media platforms, as well as my products and services, like my one-on-one online coaching service, my personal training service, where I can train you at a local gym if you live close to me, or via Zoom or Skype with in-person sessions. If you prefer to train at home and you want a personal trainer to watch over you and guide you through a session. And also my custom program service, whereby I would write you a personalized program based on a detailed questionnaire. These are all linked in the show notes as well. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.